And the ultimate truths are ones we're striving for, rather than ones that were written down in a book given to largely illiterate peasants 2,000 years ago. Then I'm all in favor of it.
Okay, well, it was written down by illiterate peasants. It shows it's miraculous because they were illiterate and they somehow wrote something down. So thanks for the great argument for Christianity. But
the books were, as you well know, the books were written down well after the events, right? We all agree with that, right? Written down by people who could write 100 to 200 years after Christ, for example.
Okay. 200 years. Wow. Okay, you should read some more.
What's going on, guys? I know you've probably heard people say something like religion thinks they have a monopoly on morality, and the world would be a much better place without religion, specifically Christianity. Well, in this video, atheist Lawrence Krauss debates Mike Jones on the issue of morality. Does secularism provide a better foundation for morality than Christianity? But in this video, no hyperbole, Mike Jones was surgical with his dismantling of Lawrence Krauss. And he had a crazy mic drop moment. Man, this was excellent. I'll give my thoughts on the back end of this video, so let's get into this long one.
Well, thank you. Again, I will remind people the debate is which is better for society today. We've not seen a lot of evidence that secularism has actually
I said look
better.
around.
Okay. Do you...
Will, just to be sure we don't interrupt each other's
Yeah,
thoughts.
can you back up a little bit for me there? Yeah, so again, okay, we've not really seen any evidence that secularism is actually better than Christian societies today. We've just been told, oh, it produced stuff in the room. What's your evidence for this, okay? You said I disproved my point. Well, we're not debating if the U.S. was founded as a Christian nation. But if you want to claim it's secular, great. Guess what was allowed in the Constitution? Slavery. So you just said secularism is responsible for slavery in this country. Thank you. We appreciate that. And actually, if you read people like Robert Fogel, for example, as well as Rodney Stark, as people started becoming, and as this nation kept going, more people were attending church, and we saw the Second Great Awakening, and out of that, as Ben Wright argues, we actually saw the abolitionist movement come about, which led to the Civil War and the ending of slavery. So again, we have Christianity to thank for the abolitionist movement, which apparently secularism gave us with the founding of this nation. So we have that problem. He says, liberalism grew out of Christianity. Well, okay, what are you trying to say there? You should be saying thank you. Great, excellent. So you said we have Christianity to thank for the world we grew out of. The problem is you say that we should just keep growing out of it. You can't. You can't produce sustainable birth rates that can produce populations of secular humanists that can just keep going on and generating more progress in a society for multiple generations. So you can't grow out of Christianity. You're going to revert back to Christianity, as sociologists like Eric Kaufman have been pointing out for a long time now. So, okay, and again, now, how can so that's an important point. You asked, do you want to live in the Middle Ages or live today? Well, I have a better question. Do you want to live in the Middle Ages with a bunch of Christians or with no Christians? Because as you have already admitted, we wouldn't get the society we have today if it wasn't for what the Christians were doing in the Middle Ages. And again, a lot of the progress that's being generated is still coming from Christian values. This is all the research I cited in my opening statement, okay? That's, again, an important point. Also, real quick, I did not say secularism was evil. I didn't call it Islam. I said that it's just less optimal than what we actually get in terms of it. I far prefer to live in a secular society than an Islamic society, because a secular society will die and just be replaced by something else. And I'm going to argue I have a better chance of turning into a Christian society than in an Islamic society, for example. So, again, referring back to my opening statement, again, when we compare Christian and secular societies, what do we see? In Christian societies, we see more charity work, lower depression, lower suicide, better mental health. We see less authoritarianism. Listen, you're not going to get rid of the right. The right is always going to be there, even if you're a leftist, okay? What happens in secular societies on the right when you remove Christianity? You get authoritarianism. You get these kinds of nationalistic things. They happen. You can't prevent it. You should want everyone on the right to be a Christian. Oh my goodness. You will prevent so many problems. Why are you not promoting that? Why are you not going around saying, yes, everyone on the right should be Christian? Okay, you'd fix a lot of the problems you have, as I cited in my opening statement. So that's another important point. And again, you will get sustainable birth rates. We won't have the problems in Europe right now, where you have mass migration of Muslims coming in that are now trying to change the culture and try to push Sharia law in places like Britain. That is a problem, especially for women. I, as a Christian who believe in human rights and understand that women's rights and human rights came out of the Christian tradition, don't want to see that happen. So this is why I favor a Christian society, because you will have a society. Listen, for generations we kept Islam out of Europe, and then all of a sudden we became secular and we started inviting them all in. What happened? Christianity can keep out these dangerous ideas. Secularism opens the door for them to come in and destroy everything. Okay? If you don't want Islam to destroy Europe, you should prefer a Christian society. That much is pretty obvious. If I'm wrong, then seculars need to start producing sustainable birth rates so they don't have to keep inviting immigrants in to replace their declining and aging population. This is a huge problem that secularism is indirectly creating. Okay? That is, at the end of the day, that's just the truth of it. So again, in terms of pro-sociality, charity work, okay, depression, suicide, Christianity is producing much better societies. Secular societies produce people that are selfish and depressed at the end of the day, because again, they're not doing the same type of things that Christians are doing. So it may sound good. We can do this armchair science where we just say, well, secularism sounds better, doesn't it? Does it actually produce the effects it claims to produce? No, it doesn't. Christianity actually does. Thank you.
And we'll switch it over. We have our final rebuttal speech. This is 5 minutes from Dr. Krauss, and then the open dialogue.
Ever since Eve, Christianity has not treated women as it took a long time before women had it. Religions, all religions, in general, all the major religions, not just Christianity, Islam is one of them, have tended to make life difficult for women. To argue that somehow Christianity is the basis of women's rights is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. The notion that somehow we don't have a self-sustainable society. When I was your age, the population of the world was about 3.5 billion. The population of the world is 7 billion right now. We seem to be doing a pretty good job of producing babies, and by 2050 the population of the world will be 10 billion. There's this notion that somehow society cannot sustain itself unless we convince people that the only I won't go into the sickness of sex in Christianity. It's not worth going into. But in fact, the most sustainable, where do you have the most people? China, which is not particularly a society I admire, but they've done a pretty good job of producing a population, well over 1 billion people. If that's your notion of if sustainability is somehow a notion, biological sustainability determines what's good or what's useful in the long run, then China is a great example of that. In terms of, we have Christianity to thank. The Middle Ages, would I want to live in a world in the Middle Ages which had Christianity? I don't. Well, of course, that's a hypothetical because we don't know what the world was like. But I can guarantee you what we wouldn't have had was the burning of witches. And in fact, that's a great example. To me, the burning of witches is a really interesting example of history of science and how it's changed things. Because there's really good historical evidence that's been discussed that, in fact, the ending of the burning of witches happened around the same time as Newton developed the Principia. Because what Newton told us was that, in fact, the same laws that govern an apple falling on Earth govern the cosmos. And not only that, the cosmos was understandable, and that physical effects have physical causes. That changed everything. Because suddenly it made the notion that the fact that the weather was bad wasn't due to a woman who you didn't like in a village that you could burn. The notion that supernatural causes of effects went out the window came with Newton. He was, by the way, ultimately quite religious, I would say. But that Newton's result that the world was understandable and comprehensible, and that physical effects have physical causes, ended that kind of religious nonsense. And so, in fact, I guess I would say, the end result, I would say, is that, I guess I quote a late friend of mine, the Nobel Prize-winning physicist Steven Weinberg, who was an atheist, but he said, there are good people and bad people. Good people do good things, bad people do bad things. When good people do bad things, it's religion.
Okay. Thank you very much for that rebuttal as well. We're going to kick it into the open dialogue. Gentlemen, the floor is all yours.
Have you read the Lombard Law Code of 643?
No.
It says, let nobody presume to kill a foreign serving maid or female servant as a witch, for it is impossible and ought not to believe by Christian minds. The canon episcopal from around 900 AD stated witchcraft did not exist. Why were these happening in the early Middle Ages if burning witches was a huge Christian tradition?
Well, look, actions speak louder than words.
Okay, well then.
Okay, hold on.
Go ahead.
Yeah, can I finish? Yeah. Okay. So, just explain to me who ran the Inquisition. No, just tell me. Was it just who ran it?
Catholic.
Oh, sorry, the Catholics, the bad Christians?
That's not what I said.
No, okay, so who ran the Inquisition? That
Catholic
burned witches, that tortured people, that did unbelievably depraved things.
Have you read Nathan Johnstone? He's an atheist.
I don't need to read people. I know
you don't do a lot of reading.
I mean, I read a lot.
Nathan
But
Johnstone.
quoting people is not the same as talking about how the world works.
Okay.
It really frustrates me. People say, this person said this. The point is, we know what the Inquisition said. I don't need some guy to say, well, the Inquisition was distorted Christianity. You're asking me empirically, what was once again, you said it yourself. It's not what's good and bad. I like a lot of things that Jesus said. It's not what's good and bad. It's what happens. And ultimately, Christianity had their Inquisition, and whether you like it or not, secularism produced the liberal Enlightenment.
Well,
I repeat once again that you said, what evidence is there? I'm giving you the evidence of the liberal Enlightenment and what it's brought us, and that was not Christian.
Well, listen,
that was liberal secularism.
If we're just going to do bivariate means comparisons, I can do the same thing. Your secular liberalism produced the Jacobin Revolution in France. It produced the USSR and communism, which killed hundreds of millions of people in China, USSR, across the world, these kinds of things. So if we're just going to say, listen, let's just look where the Christians are and let's see the bad things they did. Well, clearly Christianity is responsible. I can do the same thing with your secularism.
No, but you were quoting the Middle Ages in particular. That's what broke me up when you said we'd rather have a world with Christianity.
Do you understand what different variables are? Like there's like, for example, if like someone goes in, like a vegan goes and shut up the headquarters of YouTube many years ago, we understand there's multiple variables at play.
Yeah.
It wasn't veganism that caused her to do
but
that.
why? But you keep saying that. But that's exactly what you're doing. You're arguing that secularism has produced some bad things. Of course it has. I told you, there are good people and bad people. They're good religious people. They're bad religious people. They're good. And you know, that's. I'm asking empirically. Look at the world of the 20th century, which whether you like it or not, is based on the secular liberal Enlightenment and science. And the realization that science gives no evidence for purpose or evidence for God, no evidence of infallibility, no evidence that humans are special creations, none of that.
Then why?
And that produced the kind of society that we have today. And that our society has lots of problems today. Let me not suggest that we live in a perfect world, but progress happens by people realizing, looking at the world, realizing that things are bad and trying to fix them. Not saying it'll be okay after you're dead.
Then why isn't secularism fixing the problems? Why is it the Christians that it's producing better mental health, more charity work, sustainable populations? If this is all from secular humanism, then why is the research coming out of the secular humanist culture showing that Christianity produces far better results?
Well, look, once again, let's look at the results of what came out of Christianity and what came out of secularism. What came out of secularism are the very studies that you're talking about, the very framework of the academies on which universities are based. Now, I will tell you, for example, that I've been a scientist for 45 years, let's say, something like that. I've never once in any context, in any discussion about the world and how to solve problems or how to address the challenges that we face as a society or as or technical challenges, I've never once heard the word God mentioned. It's irrelevant. Christianity is simply irrelevant to what is going on to producing, effectively changing the world. Whether you like it or not, the progress that has been made in our understanding of nature and our understanding of ourselves, our understanding of how to treat others, our understanding of what women are like compared to men, what animals are like compared to humans, the sympathy and empathy we have for other beings has all come from a better understanding of ourselves, and that better understanding of ourselves did not come from revelation. It came from empirical studies and science.
Okay, are you done filibustering? Because I have a lot to say here. So,
Well, if you're talking is filibustering, I'm done with it.
Okay,
yeah.
so you're assuming somehow that Christianity is incompatible with these things. No.
No.
Christianity. Well, if you say no, you're proving my point. Christianity produced a lot of these things you like rationality, science, and these kinds of things. It came out of the Christian tradition for a reason. It's because of things that James Ungariano talks about in his book Of Popes and Unicorns. The early Christian thinkers, the natural philosophers, believed the universe was rational, that it had laws that could be discovered.
So
And
did
they
the
thought they
Greeks.
had minds that could actually do. No, the Greeks actually were doing something called proto-science. They were not actually doing real science.
Oh,
They got
really?
in rooms
Okay,
and
who
they
determined the circumference of the earth? Christians or the Greeks?
It was the early Greeks who did
Yeah,
that,
I
yes.
know. So they were doing science.
They were doing proto-science.
What is
similar
proto-science?
Okay, so what they often did is they'd get in rooms and they discuss various different
No,
philosophies.
no.
Are you going to let me finish, or are you just going to keep interrupting
How
me?
did we determine the circumference of the earth? Tell me. Do you
Okay,
know?
I'm
Do you
going
know
to
how
look
they
at-
proto-science did it?
Yes, it was
You're
in
your
Egypt.
Did you read it in some history book?
It was
Tell
in
me.
Egypt.
No,
Okay.
tell me how it was done.
Okay, let me
It
finish
wasn't
now.
from a Bible. It wasn't from a thing. It was someone doing a damn experiment.
Yes.
That's science.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay, are you done?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Calm down. You'll be okay here. Okay, so let's go back. Again, early Greeks were often doing proto-science. They would make minimal observations, and then they would try to develop these different philosophies they could use to find out what is going to be the most coherent worldview. Okay, so what happens is that through the Middle Ages, as Toby Huff and Edward Grant note, science starts to become developed as its own institution. It comes out of philosophy. This comes out of the Middle Age tradition, and it was scientists borrowing from the Greeks and from Christian traditions that allowed them to develop science into what it is. I would never say Christianity is the only thing that gave rise to modern science, but it was crucial for it. That's my point.
Okay, so.
So go back to your main point. We're talking about the modern day.
But my point was that the Greeks were able to determine, use rationality.
Of course.
I mean, you must admit, if you like philosophy, that the Greek philosophers from Socrates and Plato were useful thinkers,
Of course.
secular thinkers. They believed at that time. They believed in many different gods, and
Yeah.
the Greek gods were by far more interesting than our gods. They had a lot more fun.
You're
But,
claiming they're secular?
what?
Are you claiming they're secular?
I'm saying that they were when they were doing science. That's the important
So
thing.
anytime we do science, it's secular. I
Yeah,
mean, this is
yeah, absolutely. And here's the argument. It was a very famous biologist who said this. When he goes in the
biologist. Remember that. Biologist, not historian or philosopher.
exactly, a scientist.
Yeah.
Okay, that's my point. He said, when I go in the laboratory, and by the way, there are a number of scientists who are deeply religious. It's proof that you can hold two inconsistent notions at the same time. But what he said is, when he goes in the laboratory, he is an atheist because he's assuming no divine being is twisting the dials and determining, what the results of his experiments are. So if that's the case, if he's acting like an atheist when he goes in the laboratory, why should he not act like an atheist when he goes outside the laboratory? When people are doing science, and including the religious scientists I know, they put their religious beliefs aside, and that's fine because those are personal beliefs that are irrelevant to what the results of an experiment is going to do. So science is by nature secular.
So this goes back to my main point, though, is that Christianity created this separation of church and state. It gave rise to modern science. It allowed for these things to develop as their own. This is why we don't have the Islamic world where everything has to be governed by Islam. We allow for these different
Well,
institutions.
no, the difference
Early
is-
Christians talked about the two books of God, the book of Scripture and the book of nature. So this idea of these separate institutions comes out of Christianity.
The only difference, look, I'm no fan of Islam, but one of the reasons Islam is what it is because right now the Quran is taken as a literal word of God. It used to be the case in Christianity, and that's why the Middle Ages in Christianity were very similar to the Islamic world now.
False.
The notion
early-
that you take that, the things are in the Bible, like stone children if they disobey their parents. All those things, no one takes them seriously.
Most theologians of the past
listen to
2,000
me.
years were not
You know who
literalists.
defines themselves as Christians? This is a really important point, and this is the problem, is the a monopoly on morality. The Richard Dawkins Foundation did a study of those people who claimed they were Christians in the census about 10 years ago in England. It was the first time that less than 50% of the population declared they were Christian. So they did a survey and they looked at the Christians and they said, okay, you're Christian. Do you believe in transubstantiation? Do you believe in the virgin birth? All of that sort of stuff. Do you believe in the resurrection? And most of them said no. And he said, why do you call yourself a Christian? They said the answer that almost universally was given is, we like to think of ourselves as a good person. Most people feel that if they say they're not Christian, they're viewed as people who aren't moral. The reason they call themselves Christian is they like to think of themselves as a good person. The actual dogma or theology of the church is irrelevant.
That's actually kind of an interesting result. It shows that more people realize that Christianity is associated with morality and better results, like giving to charity, pro-sociality. Those people actually seem to know something that you don't, which is that Christianity actually does lead to far morality.
Look, here.
Got him! Got him!
Tell you what, I give in. If being a good person, believing in rationality, believing that there's no evidence for any higher power is Christian, I'm all in favor of it.
Okay, well, that is not at all what anyone here has argued, and that we're not arguing if Christianity.
If you are allowing people to define Christianity by anything that makes you good, and that has all the underpinnings of a liberal democracy, that has all the underpinnings of all the things I value in life, particularly the willingness to think freely, question everything, and to realize that, in fact, the answers to how the universe works are not yet known, and the ultimate truths are ones we're striving for, rather than ones that were written down in a book given to largely illiterate peasants 2,000 years ago, then I'm all in favor of it.
Okay, well, it was written down by illiterate peasants. It shows it's miraculous because they were illiterate and they somehow wrote something down. So thanks for the great argument for Christianity.
The books were, as you well know, the books were written down well after the events, right? We all agree with that, right? Written down by people who could write 100 to 200 years after Christ, for example.
Okay. 200 years. Wow. Okay, you should read some more.
Let's return to the debate.
Let's remember the actual debate. The debate, because we're gotten way off topic. The debate is actually what is better for society. We have seen no evidence that today, in the 21st century, secularism is going to produce better results than a Christian society. We just get these vague notions about, secularism is great about free thinking and it's associated with science. What is the actual evidence? Again, I'm a man of science. When I want to find out what's better for society, I read sociology. I go into the actual sociological research. I discussed things with sociologists before I came into this debate to try to say, hey, is this a good study? Is this a robust study? And they came back and said, use this one, not that one. That one's bad. That's what we actually do. If we dive into the science, there is no debate to be had here. The research overwhelmingly shows over and over again Christianity produces better results. Now, maybe in 20 years, if Dr. Krauss goes out as the prophet of secularism and he rallies his seculars together and they start producing children and doing more charity work, we can have a new situation because we'll be updated by new science in the future. Right now, the current science shows us that Christianity is far better. It produces less selfish people, less depressed people, people that are not going to lean into authoritarianism. They're going to go out and make the world a better place. This is what the data shows. At the end of the day, this isn't a debate. It's what the data says.
That was a great debate. What we saw was the difference between research, data, statistics versus opinions and hubris and arrogance. Lawrence Krauss didn't have any statistical evidence to back up his position that secularism provides a better foundation for morality. It was his opinion, a lot of thoughts, and he went off on a lot of rabbit trails and he went off topic several times. The lack of facts really hurt his debate, and he inadvertently disproved his own position. And during the open dialogue discussion was really when we saw the gap of knowledge and preparation. Krauss didn't have any comebacks to anything Mike was saying, because at the end of the day, atheism isn't really a foundation, because ultimately atheism is a cop-out. There's no affirmative positions they take. They can't provide a basis for anything. The position is built on denial. Christianity provides a better foundation for the treatment of women, the way Jesus treated women. You can't find that in any other religion. The way Jesus treated the poor, the way Jesus treated the sick, the way Jesus treated those who are on the outskirts of the city, you know, those with leprosy. Jesus provided the basis for all of that. It is clearly a great foundation for morality. I can't say enough about how great Mike did in this video, in this debate. Clearly, when preparation meets arrogance, preparation always wins. Atheism has no foundation or basis for morality. So when the atheist complains, ask them, by what standard are you complaining about evil in your worldview? And if you enjoyed this video, you want more content like this, do me a favor, subscribe to this channel, like this video. I'll be back next week with another one. This is Pastor Frederick. This is about a book, and everything I do, you already know it's about a book. Peace.